together, and we're graduating. We're graduating, Section 17. Are you excited? Yes, let's be excited about that. Okay. Tonight is going to be full of a lot of really great information. We're going to have a great talk from Dr. Lottie in just a few minutes. I wanted to share a couple of updates with you real quickly. Byron's going to share a little bit more in detail at the end, but I wanted to let you know that we're going to have a shift in our leadership showcase. We want to make sure that we've prepared you to go into that interview, whether it's for industry or graduate school or your next step, and we want to make sure that whoever's talking with you remembers you, is excited by you, and what they think you're going to be able to do within their organization, because you are from the University of Texas at Austin. Yes? Yes. Okay. So we decided to shift to a roundtable model instead of a poster session for our leadership showcase, which is real exciting. How many of you are excited about not making a big giant poster? Woo! Okay. So wonderful news. So everybody, March 22nd, put it on your calendar. It should already be there, but just in case it's not, Leadership Showcase will take place March 22nd in the ballroom, and we'll get you more details about how you sign up for your session, okay? Second thing, for the calendars, May 4th, okay? Celebration of Leadership. We are going to be celebrating you and your graduation. We are going to be inviting your families. This is going to be the biggest celebration of leadership that we have ever had. So I want you to get excited about that. We'll be in Gregory again this year. We'll see if we can take over those 1,000 cupcakes or whatever else we decide to do this year. It was insane last year. Okay, so May 4th is celebration of, and March 22nd, Leadership Showcase. Everybody good? Okay. Again, I'm really excited to see all of you. Please remember that my office door is always open. If you come in to the UT Commons over in FAC on the 3rd floor, pop in. Say, hey, Dr. Smith, how are you? I want to hear about your next steps. I just heard someone, where are you, that just got into Harvard, PhD virology. Stand up. Where are you? Where are you? Yes! So exciting! We're so excited. Those are the things we want to celebrate. We have a brag board in our office. Okay, we have a brag board in our office, and we want to celebrate and be able to document all the amazing things that you're doing, okay? So please come in, see us. That's your home, okay? Right now, I'd love for you all to welcome Dr. Lottie. He is the founder, creator of ULN, and your biggest champion on this campus.
I heard that you all were going to be learning how to interview, and that perked my ears up because I have a take on interviewing that I think I tell anybody who ever comes to my office and asks me to write a letter of recommendation for them to whatever is going to come next. And I do it because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this notion of an interview, mostly from the important perspective. See, you all think that in going in for an interview, you're what's important, but you're not. Do you know why? Because you don't call the shots. You don't make the decisions. It's the person you're talking to that makes the decisions. They're the ones who decide to hire you. They're the ones who decide to admit you. And yet you're sitting there thinking it's all about you. And the second you start thinking about it being all about you, you do every wrong thing in the world to make yourself as unappealing to the person who's important, the person who's interviewing you. So I always think back to this profound moment I had with a pretty famous doctor from UT Southwestern who was down here on this campus interviewing students for the JAMP program. And he's in my office and we're chatting, and I said, well, how was your round of interviews this morning? And he hung his head and he said, oh, I would give anything to interview a real person. Isn't that weird? That's what he thought. And as I thought about that a bit, I appreciated what he had to say because I write lots of letters for people applying to professional school, to graduate school. And when they come in and they sit down, I look at them and I always toss this softball question at them. I simply say, Tell me about yourself. I personally think that that's the easiest question in the world, because who would know more about you than you? I'm not asking you to derive some aerodynamic equation. I just want to know about you. And yet I'm told by people that I give the toughest interviews in the world. And I think, all I ever did was say, tell me about yourself. The problem, though, is that at that particular point, 99% of the people look at me and recite their resume. I am a biology major, and I am vice president of HOSA, and by the time it's through, they've listed those 6 things as if that's their identity. And what you forget in that process is who the important person in the room is. The important person in the room is the person listening to you recite what's on a resume that they've already read. So I'd like to stop for a second and have you think about what an interview actually is. An interview is 2 people talking. It's a chat. It's a conversation. That's all it is. And in a conversation, you walk away from it knowing that it was good because, very simply, you weren't bored. If you're not bored and the person interviewing you is not bored, then the conversation was a good one. And if you want to think of it in the context of an interview, it means that they walk out thinking, yeah, I like that person. That was all right. Yeah, okay. So you might think that's kind of a weird way of viewing it, but that is the truth. You have to be interesting. And in fact, you are. You are interesting. It's just that you don't think that. You think you're boring. So much so that you think you've got nothing more to offer in this world than to tell me your major and what you're the vice president of. When in fact, your life stories, no matter what they are fascinating. See, that's what fascinates people. When I watch a movie, or I watch a TV show, or I eavesdrop on people sitting next to me at Wendy's, I'm listening for a good story. And good stories are personal. Good stories actually have nouns in them. You know, it's you describing a person you talked to, or you describing an experience you had. And yet for so many of you, some of it cultural, some of it just the way you were raised, you were taught that you weren't that important. You weren't that interesting. You didn't have that much to show off. And as a result, you don't tell those stories. What you need to be doing right now, as you look to your future, is to think about what the great stories are in your lives, because you've had them. Many of you come from the most amazing stories you can imagine, and you don't even know how amazing they are. And yet, if you were to tell those stories out loud and earnestly and honestly to the person listening to you, you would have 100% complete their attention. And when you walked out, they wouldn't forget you. So there is this need then for you to let down your guard, let down the part of you that thinks that it's too personal, thinks that it's none of their business, thinks that your mom wouldn't like it if you told that story, and instead just be yourself. Be that person that guy from UT Southwestern wishes he was talking about. Now, as I say that to you, you think, all right, sure, except that I have to tell you, what I've just asked you to do is the hardest thing to do in an interview environment. Because here's the truth about interviews. They may be conversations, but they don't really sound like what you hear at Wendy's. Here's how they work. They're like 30 minutes long, and there's somebody looking at you, and they get to ask the questions, not the other way around, at least till things start going good. And when they ask that question, suddenly you're confronted by the need to talk at them in a certain way. So what are some of the things that have to be true? Here's one. You can't give a one-sentence answer unless you're expecting 500 questions. And that gets tiring. So your answers have to be a couple of minutes long. Let's see. It'd be nice if they were organized answers. It'd be nice if they were interesting answers. It would be nice if they are professionally voiced. The way I am speaking to you right now, without pauses, without ums, without you knows, is not how I will yell at my children in about half an hour. I am professionally voiced right now because I have learned how to do that, and it took some time. And the other thing about them that's interesting is that they are spontaneous. What do you mean by that? Spontaneous? You mean just like off the top? Yeah, actually, yes. Most people think that preparing for an interview is memorizing the perfect answer, and what you don't realize is that the person interviewing, you can tell in 0.2 of a second that it's memorized, so they fall asleep. You know how they can tell? Because when you have something memorized, your eyes roll to the top of your head, like you're looking up at your brain for the answer. It's the hugest tell in the world. And it almost makes you think that if that's the way you want to do it, perhaps it should work like this. Suppose you're applying to law school and you're going to an interview. So you go to Google and you look up top 10 questions asked in law school interviews. And so you got a list of them. And then you go to Google and look up top 10 answers to top 10 questions asked at law school interviews. And like, I got my script and I read it out loud. Tell me about a time you overcame adversity. And you've got your script. Oh, I've got a good one right here. I read it off the internet. And the two of you just have this it's like a little skit, a little play. No, not at all. That's not how it works. The way it is supposed to work is you're supposed to know yourself well enough that when you're asked those answers, you just know them. You own them because you understand yourself. Now, let's think about that. 2 to 3 minute long, professionally voiced, spontaneous, interesting, organized answers. The only people I've ever met in my life who can do that are people who've been on debate teams. Has anybody ever been on a debate team? Good for you. You're probably pretty good at this. The rest of you are not. And in a moment, I'll give you a chance to prove it. Or maybe I won't make you suffer through this. But it really is true. If I told you to turn to the person next to you and answer the prompt I'm asking, and then you listen to it, to that 2 to 3 minute long, professionally voiced, organized, interesting, spontaneous answer, you'd realize after about 15 seconds that it was awful. And that's what's so great, is that when you think about it in that context, suddenly you don't need an interviewing coach. You don't need somebody for a mock interview who sits there and says, oh, that was so good. This cracks me up. I've never met anybody who does mock interviews who doesn't say, way to go, instead of telling you the truth. Do you know who's going to tell you the truth? You. Because you're going to hear it and you're going to know it. And then you're going to correct. Now, what's weird is when I was your age, I had to be the worst interview that ever lived. I had every kind of social dysfunction in the world. I had every kind of inarticulateness in the world. And now, I am Mr. Spontaneous anywhere. Do you know how I got to be that? Practice. Do you think the talk I'm giving to you right now, I didn't get ready for? Do you know where I did it? In the car this morning, on the way here, I practiced this talk I'm going to give you. Do you know that? My entire life has been made up of, in one of two places, the shower in the morning or the car when I'm alone, practicing my 2 to 3 minute long, spontaneous, organized, professionally voiced, interesting answers. If I've ever got something important, a power meeting, a presentation I have to give, you think I just walk in there cold? No, I walk in there owning it because I've worked at it. So I don't expect you to be like what I have become after 40 years of practice, but I do want you to know that it takes practice to own it. And here's how you do it. It's pretty simple. Figure out the thing that you're next going to interview for. I don't care if it's a leadership position or a job with a company or a professional or graduate school. Go to the internet and print up a list of the typical questions asked in those environments. Plenty of questions like that are out there. Just go find them. Print them out, cut them out, and put them in a little bowl next to your bed. And every night before you go to sleep, pick up one of them and look at it and read it out loud. Tell me about a time you overcame adversity. And then don't write an essay. Fall asleep thinking about a time you overcame adversity. And then get up in the morning and get in the shower and answer that question and listen to how badly you suck. And then stop and try again. And then stop and try again. And then stop and try again until the water goes cold and you get out. And believe it or not, you have actually been programming your brain to give spontaneous answers to questions. It replaces that part that feels like it has to memorize with a part that actually owns what you are. So my advice to you in this context is to identify a half a dozen great stories in your life that are worth 2 to 3 minutes. They can be stories about an experience you've had that's defined you, whether it's academic or personal. It can be about your family. It can be about a passion you can have. It can be about your greatest failure becoming a success. I don't care. But whatever it is, own it and learn to tell that story. Because you know what's going to happen in the telling of that story is the attributes that you possess, that you want to brag about but aren't allowed to, will just ring loud and clear through that story. So I could say to you, tell me 5 attributes that you have, and you'd say, I am industrious, I have integrity, I have, and they're not awful that you'd have to do that, but instead, tell me that great story, and I'm going, wow, she has integrity. Wow, she works really hard. And the next thing you know, I'm owning that perspective of that person with them just telling stories about themselves. So I've taken my 10 or 15 minutes to offer this up to you. I firmly believe in it. I can't tell you the number of students I talk to who tell me, having come back from interviews, that having been able to create that way of defining themselves allowed the interview to stop being one of those awkward question, awkward answer, and after just a few minutes become a, wow, this is an interesting person. Let's have a nice conversation. And a half hour later, the time has flown by, and you all walk out, and they genuinely look at you and say, it has been really great talking to you. Anyway, it's been really great talking to you. Thank you.